I have its revenue curve from 2015. So I have a 10-year revenue graph in front of me, folks, and it has compounded evenly at 45% for 10 years with such uniformity. It's a graph of such beauty. Now, I want all our listeners to close their eyes because I'm going to describe this so good. I've already used terms like the Nike swoosh and a hockey stick curve. So really, this time I'm going to tell our customers, our listeners, close your eyes and imagine the arching shape of a falcon's wing in flight swooshing upwards. That's the revenue curve. Better still, imagine a curling wave at its peak without the downwards bit. That's the shape of the revenue curve, folks. Okay, open your eyes again and make sure you're driving safely. Now, before everyone goes, whoa, that sounds really good, it gets better for this.
This episode of the pod is proudly sponsored by Cadiz Inc. It trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker CDZI. Cadiz is a transformative water resource company that is making a significant impact with its $5 billion in water assets and $173 million in cash. The company is currently constructing a massive water pipeline, the largest in the southwest, which is designed to ensure reliable water access for the region. Cadiz is actively combating the water crisis with game-changing infrastructure projects and strategic partnerships. Under the leadership of visionary CEO Susan Kennedy, who previously served as Chief of Staff to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cadiz is set to provide innovative solutions and substantial value to both its shareholders and the communities it serves. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. The information provided here is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Emmet, how you getting on?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
It's all good now. Tipping away here over in London. How's it back in Dublin?
That's nice. It's grand. The weather is the temperature is dropping, but the sky is blue, so it's what we'd expect or hope for, at least for a normal November, as opposed to the hottest November on record.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting back at least for a night.
For the Horizon Live event in just a week and a bit, or a week from the day this podcast goes live.
That's the one. Yeah, no, it'll be good. It's always been good, so.
Oh, it's always good. Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking that the format we explored over the years was year one, we did it in a pub, 5 Dame Lane, and we hired the place out and it was heaving. And the theme of the night was very casual, very engaged, lots of drink flowing. And it was great fun. Then last year we did it in the Westbury Hotel, which was very salubrious and, silver platters with white gloves. And it was lovely. Again, bigger event. This year, the floor of the Irish Stock Exchange, which I'm very excited about. And as you well know, we're being joined by Bill Mann and Chris Hill, and we have a great agenda. Anyway, there you go. That's this day next week.
I think it's going to double up as a Christmas party as well, won't it?
Yeah, we'll do something.
Okay. All right, let's just kick off what we're getting into today, which is Trump trades, essentially. And it's been an absolute manic week on the markets since he got elected. So I just got to run through kind of what's happened, I suppose, very quickly. So a week on from the election, Mr. Market certainly happy with the result. The Dow and the Nasdaq are up about 5% in the space of a week and a day. The S&P is up nearly 4%. The dollar's at a 4-month high against its peers. Bitcoin, which seems to be the real kind of rocket ship from all of this, it nearly hit $90,000 coin. Blew past all-time highs. If you're lucky enough to report earnings over the past week, you'll be laughing as well. We saw some huge reactions in individual stocks. So Upstart was up, I think, 47-48% in one day, up nearly 50% anyways. Axon, the taser maker, was up 30%. Shopify yesterday was up about 27% after earnings. Tesla, I mean, it's not really surprising to see Tesla considering how cozy Musk got with Trump over the campaign. That surpassed the $1 trillion mark for the first time since 2021. It really is like heady flipping times, Emmet. What do you think about all this?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely conversation to be had on the bigger picture performance of the market when there's a Democratic president versus a Republican president. But I think we should hold off on that for now because it feels a little dated by about a week. But as you said, Monday saw the S&P 500 hit 6,000 points. Dow Jones hit a new record, 44,000 points. And And the financial markets saw major reactions across all the sectors, and well, almost all the
Almost all,
sectors.
yeah.
If
I have a bit on
Yeah, I
that for
mean,
later, yeah.
no doubt. I mean, like if you listen to podcasts, you most likely saw the things that Mike has just called out and who benefited greatly from it. And when I say benefited, there's an implicit suggestion that listeners crystallize notional gains, which is ridiculous, really, because nobody benefited, nobody lost unless you took an action 2 weeks ago and then sold about a week ago. So, as a whole, financial services, I think, were the leaders, the ones that had the greatest gains, like JP Morgan, Chase, Goldman Sachs, and they had an 8%. They both had an 8% jump. And when you contemplate the sizes of these companies, like they're hundreds of billions in each. JP Morgan is something like a 650 billion business. So when it jumps by 8%, that's a serious
Yeah.
increase in
Especially
value.
for such a
And the
sleepy
reason
stock like a bank as well. They don't make those kind of moves.
No, I mean they've been around since button boots, and really the reason is that investors anticipate that Trump and his administration will support higher interest rates and more favorable regulatory environment for big banks, which is probably true. And what I suspect everyone who listens saw was the point you made about Tesla
Yeah.
jumping, where its shares just popped. Was it 15%?
It's added almost like 400 billion quid in market cap since the run up to the
Yeah,
election, since the market kind of figured Trump was going to win, and then since
yeah.
yesterday Musk got added to this head of government efficiency thing.
Efficiency.
Yeah,
Yeah, efficiency minister or something. I mean, it's no surprises really because Elon was very visibly there throughout the campaign. Everywhere you looked, Elon was endorsing Trump. And so the Tesla surge really was driven by the optimism around that relationship,
yeah.
really, which sparked hope for policies that, benefits American manufacturing and specifically the EV
And
market.
on that,
It won't do it any
did you
harm.
see what your man JD Vince was caught saying? No, JD Vance,
No, Vance.
JD Vince.
Hold on a minute. If Trump goes to meet his maker sooner than most Americans would prefer, he's going to be the next president. You better
I
learn
don't think he's
this.
coming after this podcast, Emmet. But he was saying in an interview something along the lines of, "Oh, maybe like it was kind of one of these veiled threats or just kind of peacocking, but essentially, the US will reconsider its participation in NATO if the EU doesn't acquiesce to Elon Musk gains with Tesla and all the rest, like mad stuff."
I didn't hear that. Now, that record has been played before. I know,
They
as
do,
far
they
as
do.
I
They
recall.
kind of shake this
y-
NATO stick at the EU a lot, but
mm,
just to come out
yeah.
and say it for the benefit of one individual or for a public company like that is jarring.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is. No, there's a lot of people whose sensitivities and sensibilities are completely assaulted with the thought of America leaving NATO. So, as a threat, I guess it's as big a threat as the nation can make to the rest of the world.
Yeah, but just for it to be
Um,
on behalf of a public CEO, I think is what so rattling to hear.
you touched on Bitcoin, $90,000 a pop. I mean, everyone who's got crypto remorse, including myself, looks at Bitcoin as the poster child of that remorse, really. Um, I think the entire market cap of Bitcoin now is about 3.1 trillion, which is a new high. Again, people look at it and go, 90,000, has the horse bolted? Is the run over? Or is there more? And a couple of years ago, when I was uh, on Wall Street, kind of meeting different venture capitalists, investors, and people in uh, uh, commercial banking on Wall Street, they had all kind of they were all flying a flag saying, "Oh, someday one Bitcoin will be worth $1 million." And I've heard it a few times here and there since. But now that it's approaching 100,000, not to say that 100,000 is a proxy that it's going to grow another 10x, it's such a credible force in the financial world. Anyone who didn't buy sooner, like me, feels like, ugh, that was a big mistake. I should have invested and bought a Bitcoin when I was told, which was $2,000 when I was told.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what Trump said, he said he vowed to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet, which is interesting mostly
Yeah,
because Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, he's his line drawn in the sand when it comes to crypto for a long time.
yeah,
Basically, won't wants Bitcoin to act like a security or not Bitcoin in general, but crypto tokens as a security, while also not really creating a path to that, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So I'm
yeah.
not really sure what's going to happen here with crypto coins actually be treated like securities, because I don't think anyone wants that. The crypto people obviously don't want that, because that means, regulation, where the whole point of this was it was deregulated finance. But it's
Yeah.
for another time. But it's interesting to see what the future would be there for someone like Gensler, who's really against crypto as a whole, or as an entity, we'll say. And it's
Mm,
hard to see what a final solution would be in terms of, well, do you make the path easier for crypto by just doing nothing, or do you try to bring it in to the fold and treat it like a security, and then you bring in extra regulation or whatever else? So I'm not really sure what the end result is going to be. I'd say everyone's going to be happy in the crypto world; they're making a fortune, but
yeah.
what comes of it, I don't know. So yeah, we'll see.
It is an area of constant interest to me, and I have to say, I have a front row seat on the balcony of ignorance because I just don't implicitly get it. You could throw a microphone in front of me and say, "Here, talk about 30 stocks, go," and I would literally, I could keep going to 300. But when it comes to crypto, um, I really am just a customer of the information and experts. I'd love to get a podcast together with experts, which I will not participate in because how little I know. But it is there. Nobody can deny it. I mean, yeah, it's a whole asset class now that is hyper validated. I mean, to say, oh, is it validated? That's a 5 to 6 year old argument. I mean, it's there now. We just have to wonder what will Bitcoin look like in 10 years' time? And I guess mass market adoption, where people are paying with Bitcoin and paying each other with
I'm
Bitcoin.
going to push back on that. I don't think it still has an end use. No one's going to pay for a burrito with a speculative asset, and that's the thing. Like, the use for it is if you were living in a country, say like Argentina, with
Yeah,
incredible inflation rates and like a
hyperinflation.
devaluing
Yeah.
currency, or in Russia where you had your assets, say in Russian stocks or something else. Crypto is a viable option
Mm,
there. That's such a specific use case. Like, I'm sorry, but
yeah.
unless you're doing dodgy dealings, you don't really have an everyday use for paying someone in Bitcoin.
But this is where it moves in.
It's an asset. It's a cumulative asset. But the whole point of a security is that it has some form of cash flows that come back to the investor eventually. Bitcoin doesn't have that. Is Bitcoin going to start paying a dividend? Like, do you know what I mean?
Well, we're almost arguing on the same side because I agree Bitcoin will become fully absorbed when it is absolutely regular for you to pay for your burrito with a fraction of a Bitcoin. And I remember years and years ago, 10 years ago, I was in Palo Alto when we were setting up MyWallSt. And there's a coffee shop there, which is seemingly as well known in that part of the world, called Coupa. And when I went up to pay for the coffee, she goes, "Do you want to pay in Bitcoin?" It's the first and only time I was asked
Yeah,
that question. That's 10
that's
years
good.
ago.
That's a good reason. Like, there, you
You're
haven't
right,
been asked
exactly.
since.
Which, by the way, coffee probably would have cost about $40,000 had I
Exactly.
actually
That's
had.
what I mean.
Yeah, had I actually paid for it with a Bitcoin. Yeah, sure. Here you go. How many coins is it? Two. It's good value. 2 Bitcoin for coffee. I like that. So, anyway, look, bringing it away from Bitcoin. On the flip side of what happened in the last week, amongst all the assets, what's that expression? What God gave it in one hand, He takes from the other. Renewable energy stocks were thumped, and Danish companies, for example, like Ørsted and Vestas Wind Systems, are just two examples that I spotted on the day. And the reason I looked at them was that they are leaders in the wind energy space, and their shares fell by 14% and
Yeah.
13% respectively. And once that red wave had spoken, and it was very apparent and clear that President Trump was going to be the next president. So, you know, and the reason for that, I guess, is investors are concerned that Trump admin will shift its focus away from climate initiatives. And I certainly they are saying they're
I
going
mean,
to, so I can understand.
it's what it says on the tin. They've basically said that. But I
Mm,
do think it's interesting,
mm,
and I'm going to talk about this in terms of the solar industry in particular. So
mm,
yeah, I mean, like, one of the most obvious, we'll call them Trump trades, was the energy. So I think the iShares Global Energy ETF was up like 3 or 4%. That's dominated by the top oil companies, but it also does have renewable energies in that as well, bringing it down. So it just gives it an example of how much kind of how much of a bump those types of companies are getting, because it's all feeding
Mhm.
into this deregulation kind of administration, I guess. And then on the
Yeah.
other hand, the Invesco Solar ETF, which is called by the ticker TAN, that was down 17% since last Tuesday.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? That's very interesting. A good friend of mine who's an expert in energy actually told me about TAN many moons ago and said, oh, it's the one to own because it's a little bit of everything. But you're right. I never considered it when I was looking through all the stocks that took a beating.
yeah,
Ouch. I mean, that's unbelievable considering it's an
yeah.
ETF.
Like in terms of solar, the major fears are revolving around Trump said in the past that he'd like to repeal some of the actions of the Inflation Reduction Act. So this was Biden's big stimulus package from 2022. So the act offers
Mm.
solar and wind developers a 10% tax credit for using US products. On top of that, there's a 30% baseline tax credit for customers using either solar or wind. But what's funny about
Mm.
this whole thing is that TAN grew sixfold under Donald Trump's tenure. So from January 2017 to January 2021. And then under the Biden administration, it was down over 70%. And that's like
There you go.
today.
That is
So the Biden administration isn't
right.
over. And what's funny about it is it's actually, I don't know, Bill Mann and Chris Hill had a great conversation about this when they were talking about how much you can think political political machinations will have on the stock market and how it plays out in the end. Like,
Mm.
you're bringing in a Republican president like Trump, and you have a solar energy ETF grow 550% in the space of 4 years. It just doesn't add up. But what's interesting in
Yeah.
this particular case, especially when it comes to solar panels, is that it all comes down to Chinese manufacturers and Chinese imports. So First Solar is the only company out of the top 10 solar panel manufacturers in the world that isn't Chinese. And so what has happened is these manufacturers, with a lot of help from the CCP and probably unfair trading practices, have absolutely flooded the US market with cheap panels, basically ruining any local manufacturers and pricing them out from the market. So that's why the solar industry in particular got absolutely rocked in the last 4 years, because they just haven't been able to compete on price. And it was only in June of this year that Biden stuck in proper tariffs. I think there's like 100% tariff on any solar panels coming from China, um, to essentially
Mm.
just stop this practice. So it's ironic that it was actually tariffs that sent a stock like First Solar soaring, and now the tariff
Wow.
president Trump has said his whole economic policy is based around tariffs has come in, and the stock is down 20% in a week. Now,
All of that is fascinating. Everything you just said is utterly fascinating to me. I didn't know anything about TAN growing so rapidly under Biden and getting so thumped so hard under Trump. And it's funny, if I have to buy the pop-up book of tariffs, because I know that tariffs are underpinning Trump's intent, commercial intent for the country. And I of course get them, but I'd love to understand how they interrelate. This is economics 101. Anyone who's done a degree in economics or business or commerce will go, yeah, that's very simple. Tariffs in, tariffs out. It's an equation, write it down. But I need to get my head around that equation. I'd like to at least understand it because really it is influencing the things we discuss.
yeah, no, absolutely, and it's just, I don't know how the solar energy market as a whole is going to play out under Trump, but for a company that was
Mm.
absolutely rocked by Chinese imports, you have to think there maybe is a sort of silver lining where there's no way this administration is going to help that happen. Now, what you said at the start would give with one hand, take away with the other. I don't know how the tax breaks are going to work out, which the company is still very much relying on. So those subsidies make a business case for a lot of these businesses. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. Like, as in, I always say, I wrote a piece for Invest Plus on First Solar there at the start of October, and I talked about this and the political risks involved. And the other thing about First Solar in particular is that First Solar has plants in Ohio, Louisiana, and Alabama. Huge manufacturing plants in three deep red states. So it's another thing where it's like, well, is Trump really going to go after a company like that
Hmm.
has suffered from cheap Chinese imports and is a huge manufacturer in the kind of Republican go zones? So I don't know what's going to happen, but it could make an interesting contrarian play, being like, okay, we're
Mm.
going through this. I suppose, well, there's an exuberance on one side and like fear on the other side. It's kind of animal spirits in a way, and you
Yeah,
kind of plot
yeah.
it out and be like, well, maybe there's more to it than just solar bad, oil good. Especially when a stock like First Solar, we had Dan Dicker on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's the big energy trader, and I think he called it like the kind of one blue chip in the solar
Hmm.
industry.
Hmm.
So yeah, I just when you touched on renewables, I definitely wanted to bring up that point because there's a lot more nuance than people give it at first glance.
Analysis of short-term moves in the market, whether result from a new president or from great quarterly results like with Upstart, as you mentioned, is totally misguided. I mean, the volatility around these events never reflects the market's long-term trajectory, and it's always powered by overreactions. And there's loads of studies out there that say that the immediate stock movements after the announcement of a new president normalize over the following months. In fact, days. We've already seen yesterday there was a little bit of a cooling off from the pop
Yeah,
and
well,
everything reverted somewhat
it
to where
had
they
to, I
were.
think.
It had to, yeah, exactly. Anne Marie sent us a Slack yesterday saying, with tongue in cheek, "Oh, I think we're in a bubble." And as I said, our bubble is a rally you just missed.
Yeah,
But it is. And I was speaking to my sister-in-law who lives in New York City, and she was saying that they knew, as in she and her friends and associates, just knew Trump had won. I'm not saying that's how she voted, but there was something in the air. I didn't get to kind of double click on it with her, but she just said it was clear that Trump had won before it was announced, and even before they went to polls. So, and her regret was not buying the S&P
yeah,
500. So, yeah, it's all noise, baby. It's just loud noise, and it's loud noise that comes at us every 4 years, and it's a fun thing to discuss. There's nobody really in the Western world who doesn't in some way engage with the US political elections, even if they just read the newspaper. There's those who sit up all night, and then there's those like us who watch and wait to see how it affects the market.
yeah. Especially when it's become this polarizing as well, which is unfortunate. But
It's very unfortunate. It's a shame. But I think, look, everyone is just getting on it.
yeah,
It seems like everyone has just said, right, Grant, let's go.
yeah. Did you see? Sorry, this is a tangent now. But did you see your man, the
Yeah.
French guy, who bet something like 30 million quid on Trump to win? No.
No, at what odds?
So he did a series of bets. He basically he's this investor, like self-funded investor, and he said that they underpolled Trump for the last two elections, like criminally,
Right.
and he thought it was a
Yeah.
huge mispricing. So he bet on Trump.
Yeah.
He bet on Trump to win key swing states, and he bet on Trump to win the popular vote. So he bet like 30 million quid down. He won, I think, every single bet. He's up like 80 or 90 million.
Oh
It's
my goodness.
madness.
Wow. I was going to say he's rich, but he
He was
obviously was
already
before
rich
the
if you're
whole thing
betting
with
30
Trump.
million quid on one bet. But yeah, I just thought it was nuts. He did this thing.
Wow.
He did this thing where he paid like pollers to go out and not ask people who they voted for, who they think their neighbor voted for. So
Oh, very
he took a different
interesting.
tact. But
That's really powerful because I don't know what it is with polling, and as you said, over polling might be a distortive effect. But is it that people don't want to admit in a poll who they're going to vote
I think
for?
so. I think,
Is there some kind of voting shame? They say they voted for the other person to fall in.
yeah, well, I think Trump definitely brought that out in a lot of people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned that thing I did there a few podcasts ago where I was on a Viking cruise, and it was basically my wife and I were 20 years younger than the average. The reason was bought for my father, and he decided he didn't want to go, so we went, and it was along the Danube, and everybody on that ship was a 70-something-year-old married, grey-haired American. We were just the only two. We stood out at a couple of fronts. We were, as I said, younger, and we were Irish. So we kind of looked at the ship and everyone on it and figured this is a Republican stronghold because it was the debate of the moment. But as we got into conversations night after night with various couples, we found a lot of them professing a dislike for Trump very
Yeah.
strongly. And we were like, this is very strange. It just doesn't tally with what we would have labeled. Stereotypes are always wrong. But when I got on that ship, I thought, wow, this is incredible. It's going to be a conversation of Republican politics for the next week. But it absolutely was a conversation against who do you like the least. And it was
Yeah.
very unfortunate, as you said.
Yeah, and that's the nature of the U.S. election in general. I'm afraid was it became uh, pick your poison almost for a lot of
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
in the middle. But look, we won't get into it tomorrow. Do you have anything else you want to touch on before we move on from the whole Trump
Nah.
trades?
Sure, we could talk about it all day. We could have a dedicated podcast that there is no end point. Let's just push on.
Okay, so we each picked a stock, one of our recent charges and fearlesses we like the most. Do you want to lead us off, or will I kick off?
I'll go, what the heck. So I'm going to break with convention and discuss a stock that has yet to be published by Charging and Fearless. And it's due to go out next Tuesday. And the reason I've chosen it is probably entirely recency bias, because when you send me a Slack going, let's
This
pick
is the
Charging
one
and
you,
Fearless,
you
I'm like, oh,
literally finished
that's
writing in
fine. I've
10 minutes.
literally just proofed one. Well, this one is the wildest, maddest, most bonkers, nosebleed risk reward stock that my Wall Street possibly will have ever published. And I mean, that's saying something, because uh, I was excited about certain SPACs, but this, I'm going to say most of our listeners are. If I had to guess, I'd say none of our listeners have heard of this business, despite being listed on the Nasdaq. And it's worth telling our listeners before I kick off, for the sake of those new to the show, that Charging and Fearless is named after two statues on Wall Street: Charging Bull and Fearless Girl, amazing pieces of art. And it's also a weekly stock pitch from my Wall Street from anywhere in the world that we have researched and signed off as worthy of attention. Like, we wouldn't publish it if we didn't think there was upside. So we think it's a quality business with a bright future. But it's a weekly, there's 52 a year. So obviously you have to get your, what's that sifting machine that they used to use when you're sifting for gold?
Panhandle.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. So, okay. So, Mike, whenever you go to Kazakhstan, what financial app do you
Say
use?
that again.
Whenever you go to Kazakhstan, what financial
Kazakhstan.
app do you
How do you
use?
spell that?
Yeah, Kaz. Where Bharat is from?
Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry,
But
Mr.
no, I
Geo.
thought you were calling about, I thought you were talking about Tajikistan. I was like, I hope we're not recommending it.
No, yeah.
It's bad enough
There you go.
recommending a Kazakhstani stock.
That's how little I know. How often have I said that word out loud? Never, probably.
Okay, yeah.
Um, anyway, that's correct, Mike. You do. You use Caspi.
Okay.
I know you do. That's your favorite financial app. So our Caspi.kz or Z, if you're in America, is a leading fintech in Kazakhstan, and it's listed on Nasdaq with the symbol KSPI. And before I explain why it's of interest, let me tell you how it generates revenue. So it's another financial app. So it's not a million miles from SoFi. Well, it is geographically, but it's a payments platform. So it facilitates transactions between consumers and merchants. And it earns revenue from a transaction fee that's charged to merchants for processing payments. So that's revenue line one. And in the last 12 months, that revenue line grew 25% year over year. And I think, as everybody knows, the currency of Kazakhstan is the Kazakhstani tenage. Did you know that? No, me neither.
I'm carte blanche here. I don't know anything about
No,
Kazakhstan.
wait, hold on. Just wait. I'm going to explain it. I'm only telling you what they do before I'm telling you why they are absolutely worthy of a second look. Oh, I sent Bill Mann a text message about this company about 3 months ago when we were researching stocks for Nexus II. And he knows it well, and he's looked at it in great detail. And he also agrees it's high risk reward. And well, it's not in Nexus 2, but let's just
Yeah.
push on. So number one, you can pay people and the merchant pays a cut. The second thing it has is a marketplace platform. So it's an e-commerce hub that connects buyers and sellers. And again, a bit like eBay, it takes a cut on the sale. That particular platform grew its revenue 43%. Okay, so the payment in a shop bit grew 25% year on year. The marketplace grew 43%, and it's a fintech platform which offers things like buy now, Pay Later, the Kazakhstan equivalent of Klarna, and it makes money on that and consumer loans and merchant financing, and it grew that business line 24% year on year. So altogether, there's three categories of business it conducts in the country, and each has grown by at least 24% year on year. And that's pretty good. But Mike, what do our listeners love the most? The thing that I always do. We always get, oh, I hope Emmet
Describe
does
us a
more.
graph, Emmet. Come on, you've been waiting for it.
Thank you. I'll do that. Exactly. Everybody's pulling in, going, lovely. Okay. So the first thing I'll tell you is that its revenue, this company's revenue, and it's around a while. So I have its revenue curve from 2015. So I have a 10-year revenue graph in front of me, folks, and it has compounded evenly at 45% for 10 years with such uniformity. It's a graph of such beauty. Now, I want all our listeners to close their eyes because I'm going to describe this so good. I've already used terms like the Nike swoosh and a hockey stick curve. So really, this time I'm going to tell our customers, our listeners, close your eyes and imagine the arching shape of a falcon's wing in flight swooshing upwards. That's the revenue curve. Better still, imagine a curling wave at its peak without the downwards bit. That's the shape of the revenue curve, folks. Okay, open your eyes again and make sure you're driving safely. Now, before everyone goes, whoa, that sounds really good, it gets better for this Kazakhstani company that I can't even pronounce the country's name.
You don't take advice. I was like Kazakhstan. You're like,
so,
yeah, what you said, Mike.
Kazakhstan.
Tajikistan.
Kazakhstan. I know Kazakhstan is,
Kazakhstan.
look, I haven't, Mike, we can have a linguistic podcast if we want. There's no barriers to entry, but I like saying it my
Yeah,
way.
but
Okay.
just for like a little asterisk, when he says the word he's saying, he means Kazakhstan.
I know Kazakhstan, but okay, well, so the so the revenue curve, everybody has that in their head and they're like, that's good. 45% compounded with uniformity is the interesting. Now, return on equity, which is when you see return on equity of 20%, you're looking at a business that's very highly capital efficient. Its return on equity has been above 75% for 6 years.
Wow.
Now, joking aside, can anyone find a business with metrics like this? Please write to us if you can. To see a business that's grown revenues so comprehensively over a long period of time, so it isn't just a flash in the pan, and has a return on equity just sits above 75%, it's unbelievable. Its market cap in US dollars is 21 billion. So the market has recognized it's a force. It's got a P ratio, which means it's profitable. And while not many people know much about the country, including me, considering my pronunciation skills, it is the world's ninth largest country, and it is regarded as a
Ninth
stable
largest by
nation.
area, I assume, not population.
By
Yes.
area, oh, that's right. Yeah, it's 50 something, I think, by population,
Yeah.
but by area. Now, there are, as you might expect in Central Asia, there's been some recent events that have, I wouldn't say destabilized it, but would show it's a little less stable than those of us over this part of the world and further west. But really, it's an amazing business that is just so efficient and growing so fast. So if you can swallow down on buying a business, buying a stock that operates exclusively in a country that you've probably only heard of thanks to a character called Borat, then have a closer look. But really, I just wonder, will the market allow it to grow, or will the whole geography thing stand in the way? And that's always a question. Like, I'm a shareholder in StoneCo, which is a Brazilian neobank, not a million miles from Caspi's business model. And in fact, very, very similar. And it's in Brazil, which I would regard as more stable, but might be wrong. But still, the market doesn't give it due credit because of the fact that it's not American through and through. So anyway, thought it was an interesting one, and it's going live and charging in Fearless next Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that it's listed on the Nasdaq and has to go through those reporting standards would lend it some legitimacy. Obviously, there has been fraudulent stuff happen to Nasdaq listed companies, but they still have to jump through
Yeah,
hoops. Like,
they do.
like if you
They
had to
do.
go set up a Kazakhstani brokerage account to go buy this, the alarm
Yeah.
bells are ringing. But the fact that you can do it through your
Mm,
any
mm.
account you have makes a difference, I think.
Oh yeah, so caveat emptor, like this is really, you really have to be happy. Like the economics of the business are so good, so blisteringly good, and then you suddenly realize, well, this is in a place that I don't have an implicit feel for, which might be okay for you because it's pretty politically stable. There's a good economic condition. There's good regulatory frameworks in the country. It's well regarded. It's not particularly prone to war. I think it's a business worth looking at.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you do your kind of checklist and you're going through pros, cons, risks, or whatever, and when one of the
Yeah.
first risks is fluctuations in the Kazakhstani telmaj, you're really kind of deep in the weeds of stock picking kind of nerddom. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Fluctuations to fluck you Europeans. Okay, so what have you
All
got?
right, I've got something a little more normal. Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah, I think it's okay to say it considering.
Yeah.
No,
So
I don't even know what you're going to pitch, but anyway, tell us first. Maybe it's absolutely abnormal.
okay, so do you remember back in the day Parcel Motel? Did you ever
Yeah,
use that?
yeah. I was in here in
Yeah,
Ireland where
yeah.
you needed something and they drop it in it. Yeah,
Yeah, so for those who don't know, it was those lockers set up around Dublin that delivery drivers would drop stuff to, and you could open it with the code. And it
yeah,
was a good idea. Do you know what I mean? If you were getting deliveries and you were at work, you didn't have to be at home to get the driver or whatever else. I know for a
mm,
work from home reality, it mightn't be as much of an issue now. I remember it was
mm,
very handy as well because pre-Brexit, I think you could get stuff delivered to Belfast and then it would drop down to Dublin or something like that. But
yeah. And it was especially pronounced for us in an island where Amazon's distribution network hadn't really stretched into the island properly at that stage.
yeah, yeah. I think post Brexit it took a big hit, and then it got bought up by
Mm.
UPS. So essentially,
Oh,
yeah. So, but that idea, those parcel lockers where delivery drivers will drop your stuff off, you can come and lock it whenever you
yeah.
want. That's InPost's business model. I'd say they were there before Parcel
Oh,
Motel, to be honest.
right.
So
I haven't seen them around.
no, so this is the thing. It's a Polish company. It trades on the
Oh,
Amsterdam Stock Exchange under the ticker
right.
INPST. But I just couldn't get
Yeah.
over it when I started researching this business. The dominance it has over its home market. So in Poland, it counts over half the country is one of its customers. 62% of
Wow.
the population live within a 7 minute walk of one of it calls these APMs, so automated parcel machines. So
Yeah.
62% live within a 7 minute walk of one of its machines. If you just go to urban areas, this figure goes up to 88%.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it's
Wow.
got a net promoter score of 80, which I know that's off the
Wow.
charts, but for anyone
It
listening,
is.
anything above zero is positive. So
Hmm.
for something like a logistics company as well, which would inspire a lot of joy or customer loyalty, to have that kind of feedback from your customers is absolutely huge. And then just the sheer scale it has over the local population, it's really interesting. Um, and what helps with this as well is that Poland is the fastest growing economy in Europe. And if there's one thing a growing middle class love, it's e-commerce and getting just countless needless deliveries. It actually went from 2018 to 2030, 2018 to 2023. The average orders per customer went from 8 to I think it was in the 20s, so nearly tripled.
Wow.
Which it goes hand in hand, I think, with the growing wealth in a country like that. So, yeah, stock actually reminds me a bit of Kupang in that it's got a
Yeah.
really strong hold over its home country in quite a unique way. Like InPost has a growing presence across Europe, especially in the UK and France. It made a big acquisition in 2021, Mondial Relay in France.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, in fairness, a lot of its stuff, especially in France, is B2B still. It's not as much. It hasn't hit the same kind of wave of B2C, but I don't think it's feasible in general to have that same level of coverage as it does in Poland to these other areas. Just that build out and that infrastructure, it would be too much of a stretch, really. And that's similar to Coupang's business model for it really works for a dense city like Seoul with the 15-minute delivery and all that kind of crack, even just in terms of Seoul's geography and topography. So it's
Mm-hmm.
intensely population dense city.
Mm.
But you couldn't really see the creating that same kind of success abroad. Although I think it is trying with Taiwan at the minute. Is that correct?
Oh, it is. Yeah, that's right. It's entering into Taiwanese market, and it's also going into luxury goods market as well. With is it Farfetch was the name of the company they acquired?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but just the fact that it's kind of capitalized on quite a unique local market, you assume it won't be able to travel as well.
yeah,
But in
yeah,
general, I'm surprised the concept hasn't caught on more. Because
yeah.
you
So
remember,
am I. I mean, not even but if you work from home, someone knocking on your door is actually a disturbance, and I think we've all moved. Well, we've all moved our purchasing lives online. Do you subscribe for a delivery box, or do you pay per delivery?
so they have, I think of the 18 million customers they have in Poland, 12 million are app users. So there is
Right.
that, and then on top of that, 4 million of those are actually now using InPost Pay or whatever payment network they have set up, which is kind of the natural progression for these kind of logistics companies is owning more of the sales cycle. And
Yeah.
something like payments, you tack on high margin revenue on top of a system that is already happening. Um, but yeah, so in terms of like the actual business model, it apparently, according to InPost, anyways, which I guess I believe, it greatly
Mm.
enhances the capabilities of a logistics network in general. So if you can think of the number of parcels each courier is able to deliver, they claim it can deliver as much as tenfold, which makes sense as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah,
you
of course
make
it does. You just stand there and throw it into
yeah,
all the
if
different
you can
boxes.
make 5
Yeah.
stops to these parcel machines instead of to 50 individual houses, like that math
Yeah.
does add up. So passing some of that savings on then to the customer, you're laughing. So I know it's
Yeah.
competitive. Amazon, DHL, UPS, they all have some version of the same product. So competition is intense. And obviously that's the main risk factor, especially as it continues to expand across Europe. But I don't know, they clearly encapsulated something in Poland that just works for everyone. Now I'm not sure if that can be transferred as easily. Like when it comes down to it, what works so well is the fact that they're within a 5 minute walk of nearly everyone in every major city. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not sure if you could see similar levels of adoption in the UK or France. It'd be an absolute banger of a stock. It is doing quite well in terms of revenue growth, in terms of profitability, in terms of returns on capital. I will the growth be able to continue in such a way with the expansion that's going on? We're not sure. I'm worried about a lack of a very real, tangible moat, but I think there's huge potential there. And just in terms of the business
Yeah.
concept, but also they've clearly brought in some sort of operational excellence to this concept that works for them when it didn't work for other
Mm.
companies, especially in Ireland. Do you know what I mean?
And what exchange is it listed on,
It's on the
Mike?
Amsterdam Exchange. INPST
Ah,
is the ticker.
yeah, sorry, you did say that. Okay, very, very interesting. I mean, when you think about it, there's so many different opportunities for growth in that business, and it is quite competitive. But when they eventually go into owning some of the customer's wallet or transaction wallet, you can just see how it's getting bigger and stickier.
Yeah. So, okay, I think that's it for the show. Before we finish up, we're just doing a little pitch on Nexus 2, which just launched yesterday, day before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, day recording. It launched this Monday. And yeah, like as in, it's a product. Nexus 1 did incredibly well in terms of delivering 15 stocks in the end of incredibly internationally diversified portfolio of businesses that performed. I think the average return was 25 or 26% for each individual stock.
Yeah.
We had one stock that was a two bagger in the space of, I think, was it 9 months? And
Mm-hmm.
and just
That's right.
just in general, the characteristics of each stock were based around a lot was based around Chris Meyer's 100 baggers and where to find them, and isolating
Hmm.
certain individual characteristics that lend themselves to becoming world beaters of stocks. And then we
Yeah.
took that thought process, we applied it to international markets where we could find hidden gems a lot easier. The valuations played ball a lot more. So Nexus 2 is essentially just a continuation of that. We launched the new product on Monday. There are 6 stocks opening up. And yeah, if you are interested in Nexus 2, just email in at pod@mywallstreet.com. So it's pod@mywallstreet.com. And we can get a lot more information. There's an early bird offer still on the table, we think. Emmet, what's your thoughts? For
Is there an early bird
I think
offer?
for the pod listeners who email in, we might be able to figure out a deal. But
Yeah. Okay.
that's only if you email in a pod@mywallstreet.com. I'm giving I'm
Sure.
giving
Sure.
I'm giving out deals I probably shouldn't be here, but
Yeah.
you can quote me
Well,
from the pod if you email in.
Mike, we do one take. That's the other thing our listeners love about us. We do one take. We don't go back and do a bit again. So yeah, there's an offer.
Okay.
Email us at pod@mywallstreet.com. Yeah, the first 6 stocks are unbelievably diverse. They're unbelievably diverse. There's a Greek company, a Japanese company, an American company, probably a couple of Swedish companies. One of them, the American company, is one very familiar to me and won't be so familiar to those subscribe. The Japanese company, I just have to own. I just want to own it. As simple as that. In fact, if I had to only own one company, um, the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, be pretty happy with this one. So there's some 6 amazing names and a whole load more in the conveyor belt that we're working through a process to refine and get written up for the months ahead. So 6 are in there now. 9 will follow in the 9 or so months that lie ahead. And that is Nexus 2. But we really do believe we found some outstanding potential investments.
Absolutely. And if we could just recreate the success of Nexus 1, we'd be buzzing. So that's a good
Yep.
template to follow.
Yep.
Okay, Emmet, that's it for today's show. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening in. If you are enjoying the pod, make sure to leave us a review or send us on to a mate if you think they'll be interested as well. It does help with everything we're doing here. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next week.